The sun dipped below the horizon as my friends and I gathered in a dense Louisiana swamp. My buddy John showed me a cool fire-starting device, a magnesium fire starter. We scraped the magnesium shavings into a small pile and struck the flint, creating a shower of sparks that ignited the shavings into a small, bright flame. Carefully, we added dry leaves and small twigs until the fire grew steadily. We shared stories and laughter around the flickering campfire. The thick canopy of cypress trees cast eerie shadows, and the air was filled with the sounds of chirping insects and distant hoots of owls. The first night went off without incident, though we did hear a couple of strange tree falls not far from our camp. We wrote it off as beavers working and decided it was nothing to worry about. I glanced at my watch the next evening. "It's getting late. We should turn in soon," I said, and we all agreed. We climbed into our tents and quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the day's activities. A few hours into the night, we were jolted awake by a horrendous scream that pierced the silence. It was an inhuman sound, echoing through the swamp and sending shivers down everyone's spine. We fell silent, straining to listen. Moments later, the unmistakable sound of rocks being thrown into the water shattered the stillness. Large, heavy splashes indicated that whatever was out there had considerable strength. We exchanged nervous glances, our earlier camaraderie replaced by growing unease. "Did you hear that?" whispered Emma, her eyes wide with fear. The air grew heavy with an unspoken dread, and the sensation of being watched intensified. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I scanned the darkened forest with my flashlight. Without warning, another scream, louder and more guttural, erupted from the darkness. We huddled closer, our breaths shallow and rapid. My flashlight beam revealed nothing but thick underbrush and twisted roots. The sense of something unseen but dangerously close was overwhelming. As we stood frozen in fear, the sound of rhythmic woodknocks began to resonate through the trees. The knocks were deliberate, each one echoing like a grim signal. "It's close," Emma whispered again, clutching my arm. The knocks seemed to come from multiple directions, encircling us. Panic set in, and we decided to move. "We need to get out of here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We began to make our way back to our campsite, our footsteps crunching on the forest floor. But the sounds of pursuit were unmistakable. Something massive was following us, its footfalls heavy and relentless. Suddenly my mind was invaded by a voice not my own. It was a deep, resonant whisper that seemed to bypass my ears and speak directly to my thoughts. "Leave my home," it urged, filling me with a primal fear. I glanced at my friends and saw the same terror reflected in their eyes. We broke into a sprint, stumbling over roots and splashing through shallow pools of water. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows deeper and more menacing. The sounds of our own footsteps were drowned out by the thunderous pounding of the creature behind us. Breathless and desperate, we burst into a small clearing, gasping for air. The wood knocks ceased, and the forest fell eerily silent. We dared not speak, our eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The mind speak persisted, filling my thoughts with images of our narrow escape and the malevolent presence that had chased us. As we caught our breath, I tried to make sense of the voice in my head. It had felt almost like a warning, a grim reminder of our vulnerability. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to keep moving." We pressed on, the adrenaline keeping our exhaustion at bay. We moved as quickly and quietly as we could, aware that our pursuer could be lurking just beyond the edge of the clearing. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig sent our hearts racing. As we moved through the forest, Emma stumbled and fell. I swung the flashlight to help her up, and the beam landed on something that made my blood run cold. Standing at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the trees, was a massive figure covered in dark, matted hair. Its eyes glinted in the light, and it let out a low, guttural growl. "Bigfoot," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The sight of Bigfoot sent a wave of panic through us. "Run!" I shouted, helping Emma to her feet. We sprinted through the forest, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Bigfoot was chasing us, its heavy footfalls pounding the ground and echoing through the trees. The sight of Bigfoot sent a wave of panic through us. "Run!" I shouted, helping Emma to her feet. We sprinted through the forest, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Bigfoot was chasing us, its heavy footfalls pounding the ground and echoing through the trees. We reached the vehicle, piling in and locking the doors. I started the engine, and we sped away, our hearts still racing. Somewhere along the rough, winding road, we hit a large branch. The car continued for a bit, but 5 miles down the road the engine suddenly overheated. Steam billowed from under the hood and the engine sputtered to a halt. "We can't go any further," I said, looking at my friends. "Let's set up camp here. We're far enough away from the site, and we need to let the car cool down." Reluctantly, we set up our tents and tried to calm our nerves. Exhausted, we eventually fell asleep, hoping we were safe. But about an hour later, the nightmare began again. We were jolted awake by the sound of wood knocks, louder and closer than before. Each knock reverberated through the night, a chilling reminder that we were still being watched. Then came the screams, louder, more guttural, and filled with anger. They echoed through the forest, making it impossible to ignore the presence of Bigfoot. Small rocks and acorns began hitting our tents, causing us to jump with every impact. It felt like a relentless assault designed to keep us in a state of terror. The sounds of heavy footsteps circled our campsite. We could hear the creature running around, its massive form crashing through the underbrush. The ground trembled with each step, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. At one point, something brushed against the side of my tent, and I held my breath, afraid to move. The faint light from my flashlight cast eerie shadows on the tent walls, creating a sense of impending doom. "Did you see that?" John whispered from his tent. "Something's out there. It's right outside." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I knew that Bigfoot was just beyond the thin fabric of our tents, observing us with an unsettling intelligence. Then, without warning, a loud thud shook the ground. It was followed by another, and then another, as if something or several somethings were stomping around our campsite. The thudding grew louder and more intense, each impact sending vibrations through the earth. We clung to each other, paralyzed by fear. The mind speak returned, more insistent this time. "Leave my hunting grounds," it commanded. The voice in my head was accompanied by vivid images of our intruder, massive, towering figures with glowing eyes, watching us with a mix of curiosity and hostility. It was clear that we were trespassing in their territory, and they wanted us gone. Finally, as dawn approached, the noises began to fade. The first light of day brought a sense of relief, but we knew we had to leave. We packed up quickly, our hands shaking, and made our way to the vehicle. We patched the hole in the radiator with bubble gum and filled it with clean spring water we found from a small creek running under the road. Believe it or not, that bubble gum plugged the small radiator hole for almost a month, although I didn't do much driving after the incident. As we drove away, the oppressive feeling of being watched slowly lifted, but the memory of that night would haunt us forever. Back in the safety of our homes, we struggled to recount our experience. It felt surreal, like a nightmare we couldn't wake from. I knew that whatever had chased and terrorized us was not of this world, and the encounter had left an indelible mark on our lives. The next day, we vowed to never return to that swamp, but the story of that night would be told and retold, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking in the shadows of the Louisiana swamps. Please email your stories to us at camptownscary@mail.com. We can't wait to delve into your frightening adventures and share them with our community.